Well, welcome to the October edition of the Home Missions Report of the Presbytery of Ohio. I'm Mike Dierks, Regional Home Missionary Coordinator, and today we're talking with Brad Peppo, Regional Home Missionary in Miami Valley, and focusing our attention in this video around what's happening in the Hispanic community. So kind of give us the background of, where this all started, and then we'll talk about where it's heading or what's happening and how we can pray. So just kind of the background. What's the background of the Hispanic ministry?
Okay. Yeah. So the beginning of it was with Light of the Nations, as we had planted downtown, and particularly as we got into the portion where we were looking for a building, looking for a permanent place to meet. We found a building that was available on the east side of Dayton. And this was a building that was in Dayton's immigrant-owned business quarter. So it was a place where I think there was about a third of the population in the neighborhood there is of Hispanic origin. So one of the things that we looked at for our outreach ministry right from the beginning of getting settled there in Dayton was English as a second language ministry. And so we started that at the beginning of last school year and did a full year of that. We had about 40 different participants come in, 40 different students through the course of the year. And the way that's structured is we do an English lesson for about 45 minutes, and then we have a break where we talk a little more informally, and then we have a very short Bible lesson that I do, usually about 5 to 10 minutes in between, and then they have another 45 minutes of the class. So what began to happen as a result of that English ministry was that we started to get to know some of the folks there on a more personal level. We started having some events at our house, at the Peppo's house, and some other kind of cooperative things with other members of the congregation. And some of them actually ended up attending and beginning to attend worship there at Light of the Nations also. So through the course of that, it just became fairly evident that we needed a little more Spanish ability than we had. And I in particular, as the primary one that was interacting with them. So this past summer, I went and did a 6-week intensive course down at a language school in Costa Rica, and that helped. But it was only 6 weeks, but it's boosted me a bit. In the course of preparing for that and realizing that I needed to pick up some more Spanish in order to make the most of these relationships we were forming with these people in Dayton, and we also had our Springfield church plant. And for actually, even back when I was there as an organizing pastor in 2015, 2016, there was a group of Mexican Presbyterians, a handful, maybe 20, 25 folks that had been meeting in the building for worship. About a year and a half ago, Living Water decided that they would try to focus in on that ministry. And so they called James Stafford in, James, whose Spanish is very good, much better than mine. And he served as an intern with Grace Church in Columbus and with Living Water in Springfield, and organized and led that worship and did the preaching for the service of those folks there. So when he was getting ready to take another call in Columbus, Living Water approached me, and we talked about what do we do to keep this group going, to keep it moving. We agreed that we would try to find someone else with Spanish skills to come in, but I perhaps foolishly, but in any case, I offered. I said, well, I'll probably be to the point by that time where I can at least read a sermon in Spanish. And so that was our default plan. And right before I left for Costa Rica in June, a little more backstory on this one. There's a church that I've been interacting with up in Sidney, and we had intentionally focused in on Sidney as the next place that we would like to look at doing some church planting. And so in the course of all of that, as I was getting to know some of the churches and some of the pastors there was one fella in particular with whom I was forming more of a relationship. We were getting together somewhat regularly, talking about Reformed theology and those sorts of things. Well, he heard that I was going to try to pick up some more Spanish. And there's a food processing company up in Sidney that employs about 75 Spanish-speaking folks. And then it turns out there's about 600 to 700 in that small town of Sidney as well. So there was one man in this church that worked at that food processing plant who was really encouraging the pastor, we need to develop some kind of Spanish ministry here. So the pastor, hearing that I was going, and I was starting to get ready for that, asked me, what I might be able to do to help them. And I said, well, I'll already be doing this service on Sunday afternoons in Springfield. Maybe I can just come up in the evening on Sundays and do the same thing up there. So that's what we've been doing ever since. I guess it's been about 6 weeks now. So on Sunday mornings, I'm at different churches, sometimes at Light of the Nations, but then Sunday afternoons, I'm in Springfield about 1 o'clock. We do the service there. I preach there, and from there I go to Sidney. And very, very different groups. The Springfield group is it's a group of Reformed Presbyterian folks from Mexico. They do all the rest of the worship. They do their own singing. They lead the prayers. All that I'm doing there is preaching. So that's something of an organized group. We're trying to figure out what the future would look like for them, whether they would want to come under Living Water as part of that church, whether they would maybe want to consider becoming a mission working towards becoming their own organized congregation in time. So we're just trying to work through that with them, figure out what their plans are. The Sidney group is very different. The Sidney group is primarily unchurched Hispanics, unchurched Spanish-speaking folks that members of the church, and particularly folks who are connected with this food processing plant, have been inviting them. So it's more an evangelistic kind of service. We're going through the same thing. We're going through the Gospel of Luke, but the interaction is a little bit different afterwards based on sort of the makeup of that group and where they're at. We've had both places in the last week. We've had new people come, which is good. It's really, really hard for me to tell how well I'm doing. I can kind of go by the expressions on the face, whether anyone's understanding anything I'm saying. And usually they're very encouraging, but maybe it's just because they're encouraging people. But for me, when I saw that they were actually inviting other people to come, I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm not doing so terribly that they're not embarrassed to bring other people. So I think the word's being proclaimed. People are hearing it. It's obviously not a long-term solution. I have begun thinking about other things to do, and even maybe possibly looking at some intern possibilities, other folks with language skills to bring in. But coming back to Dayton, again, we're in the same position as we were last year, where I've had 4 different participants in the ESL program express interest in coming to the church. Right now, there isn't anything being offered in Spanish on Sunday mornings, but it's looking like very soon that I'm going to be doing that there as well. So it could be that in the next month or 2, we'll be doing three services like that, one in Dayton, one in Springfield, and one in Sidney. So that's what's going on with those ministries right now.
Okay, wonderful. Just a couple of questions along that. How large is each of the groups? So, how many are in Sidney? How many are in Springfield, and then in Dayton? Just to give people a flavor for
good
groups.
So we have been inundated in the last few weeks with new folks from Columbia at the Dayton English ministry. We have 40 new students this year. Now, usually we have about 20 plus in attendance on any given night, but just in the last 4 or 5 weeks, we picked up 30 new students. I'm not sure exactly what the circumstances are that have brought so many Colombians here, but that's been our major increase. But we also have El Salvador represented, in Mexico, we have Ecuador, we have Honduras represented, so it's a very diverse group. So I would say, all told, of all the folks who are involved in one way or another with some frequency, we've got about 40, 50 people there. As far as the number that have visited, I think we've had 2 or 3 in the last couple of weeks that have visited, but we've had 2 or 3 more on Tuesday nights who have said, when are your services and what do you offer? So that's about that size of that group. The Springfield groups, usually 25 or so. Some of those are living also on the west side of Columbus, and they make the commute in for that. But even in that one, there were some new people that were brought, and it seemed that they had been brought in from the Springfield area. So I think the particular Springfield makeup of that group is increasing. The group up in Sidney is still very small. We've had 1, 2, 3, 4. We've had 5 Spanish speakers come, and then there's about 5 people from the church also that are there on those evenings. So I met with their pastor this week, and we're just sort of assessing, how long do we do this with what kind of numbers, and what do we do to encourage more people to come. So those are the sizes of those groups right now.
Good. So maybe a circuit rider type of model, the old frontier circuit rider. So you got
Yes,
the musket in the background there for it.
and the raccoon hat too. Yeah.
And the raccoon
And,
hat. Yeah.
and again, let me reiterate and emphasize. I'm doing this right now because there's no one else here to do it, and I have to. The ideal would be to have someone as soon as possible who really is able to, because I'm able to preach. I think I can just get by with the preaching. I'm not able to interact in as meaningful a way as I really need to interact with these folks in order to get to know them better. That's a little bit different in Dayton with the Dayton folks, because we spend that sort of intensive time together every week. I feel like I've got relationships developing with them. But we really need somebody who really knows what they're doing to come and help me with this, and then eventually probably to take it over for me.
Okay, well, good. I mean, you've kind of laid out where you started, kind of what's going on now, and you've already entered into how can the churches pray. Sounds like for the right man to come along, but how else can the churches pray for this ministry tour to the Hispanics there in the Miami Valley of Ohio?
Thank you. Good. In the meantime, while we're still waiting for somebody, and I think I asked for this prayer request the very first time we began talking about this on a video interview. I need my Spanish to improve. I'm hitting it pretty hard every day. I'm having lots of opportunities to practice it, and it's coming. But again, in a few weeks, I'm going to turn 48. So the language acquisition part of my brain is retiring faster than I would like it to. So prayers for me as I continue to struggle to pick up enough of the language to have meaningful interactions with folks. A prayer, I think that more people would come. There's definitely in each one of these places, there's definitely a need that's not being met and that needs to be met. So and the more people that come, I think the more we'll have the opportunity to present ideas to people who might be interested and say, look, here's the ministry that's going on here. It's really taking off, even with someone without any idea what they're doing. So just imagine if you knew what you were doing, if you could come in. So more people to come. I think the right guy, my language acquisition in the meantime, and just our relationship with the people, that those we grow, especially at the Dayton plant. What we do, the Bible lesson that we do is interactive. That's probably the most frightening thing I do all week, because it's not just me reciting Spanish, it's asking questions and trying to understand responses and back and forth. But we're walking through passages out of the Romans Road, and the interaction has just been incredible. One night in particular, there was one guy who was answering every question immediately and perfectly. And afterwards, I talked to him and found out for the last 3 years, he's been studying theology in El Salvador. And our language isn't enough that we can really get, we're planning on meeting, but I need to pick up the language so I can get to know him better. And that's the kind of thing I'm envisioning, like down the road, there are these people in our community who are theologically in tune, and how do we bring them in, and how do we use them, and how do they help us reach their own countrymen who are in this city far from home with them.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Brad. Short, quick video, but I think it's important for the presbytery to know that this is happening in Ohio, and there's other pockets of immigrants in our cities that we're in, and you've shown kind of a template of how can we access that and bring the gospel of hope there, and really find resources within that body or within those groups that may be able to step in at some point into that leadership spot. So,
right. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Brad.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mike.